So, talking of challenges, let's move on to the next item, which is around recruitment strategy, and I'll invite Joanne Loss to introduce the paper.
Thank you. So this paper is about how we plan to recruit staff to work for the Commissioning Board. And I should say that up front, it's not about CCGs or commissioning support organisations, though I will refer to them in a little while, and Barbara may want to say something about plans for recruitment in those organisations when I've finished. The first thing I think that's worth noting is the Chairman referred to it, is the scale of the challenge. We think about the timescales around the establishment of the board. It becomes an ENDPB in October, and it takes on its full set of statutory responsibilities in April 2013, at which point existing SHAs and PCTs are abolished. So we basically have little under a year to fill at least 3,500 jobs within the board, which may on the surface sound as if it's quite a long time, but believe me, once you start getting the Gantt chart out, it isn't. We also have, this changes a different kind of scale than we've been used to in the NHS before. So I think in previous changes what we've seen is maybe 3 organisations becoming one organisation and a parallel transfer of responsibilities. Here we have over 160 organisations that the Commissioning Board is taking some kind of functional transfer from. And also the Commissioning Board will be a single organisation, a nationwide organisation with offices geographically dispersed, and we've not seen that before. In terms of achievements to date, we have obviously already made some progress. The fact that people are sat around this table's evident of that. So we have a chair now and 2 non-executive directors. We have 8 national directors. The last director post, which is the patient insight post, will be recruited to sometime in the next few weeks. We have an operating budget and a broad organisation design. Some of that stuff came to previous board meetings. And we have what we call a people transition policy, which came to the first board meeting. And that basically is the framework of rules by which we will recruit to the board posts. We should note, and the board have seen it before, but just to remind ourselves, one of the key principles of that people transition policy is that the board will consider staff affected by change by these reforms and staff at risk before it goes to open advert. So what that means in reality is you actually might not, if you're sat out there, you might not see many jobs actually advertised through open competition. In fact, if the process works well, you won't, because we will fill most of the posts from people who are affected by change or at risk. We're obviously not the only new organisation on the pitch. There are other big national organisations like the NTDA and HEE, and there are CCGs and commissioning support organisations being established. One of the high-level principles we've agreed is to align recruitment timetables across the new system, and we've done that very consciously so that staff who are looking for jobs can see opportunities at the same levels at the same time across the new organisations. Having said that, we're slightly ahead in our planning, so we're probably experiencing some of the kind of planning issues first, and we're helping the other receiving organisations understand some of the things that we've already been through. So in broad terms, what we're trying to do is by the end of December get to the point where we've finished all our recruitment processes, so that by the end of December all staff in the existing system know what their futures are. And then there are 3 months left then before we become fully operational and before organisations are abolished. There are two broad sort of parts to the timetable. During May and June, we're planning to recruit all the what we call very senior managers in the jargon, a pay framework that governs the senior management posts. And the reason we're doing those first is because they're important to finish off the design work of the board, and they will recruit the other staff. And then from July to December, we'll be recruiting the other staff in tranches. I suspect someone will ask me when I've finished if we feel that's doable, if we've got a feel for whether that's manageable. We plan to review this at the end of June when the VSMs should be appointed, and we plan to review it also in October. To some extent, there is an end date here. 31st of March 2013 is an end date, so it will need to be done by then. But it may be that when we review it in June or October, we need to decide that we've got to do it in a different way because it's just not moving quickly enough or whatever. The only exceptions to that general timetable are that we've agreed that we're going to recruit to some priority posts slightly before the others. And these are posts that we felt were really critical to the rest of the recruitment in May and June. And as an example of that, we're going to recruit the 4 sector or regional directors in Ian's directorate who will help with the design and help with the recruitment to the local offices. The paper talks about transfers versus recruitment, and I don't want to get too technical about TUPE and COSOP and things like that because people will probably go to sleep. But in broad terms, there'll be 2 routes. If you're a member of staff who's affected by change or at risk, there'll be 2 routes to get a job in the board. If you work in a function that is going to transfer to the board, you will go on a transfer. If you don't, it'll be a recruitment exercise. We've already started to look at in detail what might be a transfer and what might not, and there's a high-level functions map that we are currently doing a lot of detailed work beneath to try and work out what's a function transfer and what isn't. But as an example, the patient safety function to the MPSA is something that we've already talked about will transfer to the board. There's a huge amount of preparatory work going on at the moment. So there's detailed timetabling, logistics planning, process mapping. We're producing a recruitment guide for our managers and planning what training we're going to be giving them. We're looking at improving communications generally between us and sending organisations. We're looking at induction so that as soon as staff are appointed, we'll be putting them through induction training. And we're doing quite a lot of ongoing partnership work with trade unions. I talked earlier about the people transition policy. When the board approved it at its first meeting, it was agreed that we would review it. I said earlier the commissioning board's one step ahead of all the other receiving organisations. Ours was the first PTP that was published, and to be truthful, people didn't quite know how it would work in practice. So we agreed with the unions that once we'd used it for the national director appointments, we would review it. As it is, it seems to have worked reasonably well, and as far as I can tell, the unions don't seem to have too many major problems with it. So it'll be more of a refresh and a clarification exercise, not a major rewrite. But because of the pressing timetables and the time between now and the next board meeting, it would be helpful if the board could delegate authority to sign in the refreshed document off to the chief executive, please. So that's something that I'm looking to discuss at the end. There is a considerable amount of effort going into, it came up in the last item about OD, there's a considerable amount of work going on around OD at the moment. Successful organisations don't develop by chance. And the commissioning board's got a very clear vision of what it wants to be and how it wants to operate, and some of that came out in the discussion of how the kind of relationship we want to have with CCGs. And therefore, we need to feed all that into this recruitment exercise. So part of your discussion, what I'd add to that is when we recruit, one of the things we'll be doing is we'll be recruiting for values and skills as well as qualifications and experience. And we're developing some work at the moment around what that might look like, how it might practically work in the recruitment exercise, what kind of questions we might ask, how we might shortlist, etc. Because in many ways, the commissioning board will be breaking new ground as an NHS organisation. We've talked a little bit about the style of it, but it'll also be for the first time a single nationwide organisation with offices around the country, which means it'll have a single vision, a single style, a single operating model, clinical leadership at the fore, patient-centred, relentless focus on outcomes. People will know from other documents that we've published that we're going to work in a matrix way. So and all of that doesn't happen by chance either. So staff will need support and development to work in that way. And I hope that people will see that as an exciting and groundbreaking thing. I mean, when we talk about it, we get excited about it. And I hope that when staff see some of the jobs that are coming up, they'll see that this is very different to what we've done before, but it's also very exciting, a different way of working. The chairman introduced me by saying this is a challenge. It is a challenge, and there are some. It requires a military level of planning. I think there are some issues we are still working to resolve in that planning. So the planning is throwing up some issues. One is that we need to complete our detailed organisational design as quickly as possible, and therefore recruiting to our management posts is really important to that. The national directors recognise this. We've discussed this issue many times and a lot of the issues that underpin it, and people are working hard to finish the organisation design. We need to nail down the transfers issue. What's a transfer, what's not a transfer, and therefore what's going to be recruitment. We need to put some more capacity in place to support this process. It's important when we do that we don't undermine the current NHS system. We don't pull lots of HR staff out of the current NHS system to help with this. So we're talking to sending organisations about how we can best do that. And the trade unions have some concerns about pace outstripping process. So as I say, there is a defined end date here, and we will get there. The issue is how well we do this process, and I know the unions are worried that we'll do it so quickly that we don't do it properly. We are working very hard with them to ensure that doesn't happen. Chairman, the purpose of the paper is threefold. One is to note and discuss progress. One is to note and discuss the challenges or anything else that may arise. And the third one is to delegate the authority of approval of the PTP to the Chief Executive, please.
Thank you very much for that presentation. Let me take any questions or discussion from members of the board. Kieran.
Thanks. I think, Joe, it's picking up on that last point around when the pressure comes on.
Yeah.
Lots of people have to be recruited by yesterday.
Yeah.
How do we make sure that the arrival, the receiving, the induction survives that as well? So, because I think we probably do a very good job on making sure the recruitment is done properly and everything is evaluated correctly. But I don't suppose we'd want the arrival to be compromised because of that. And you can easily see how we've more recruitment to do, so let's forget the induction for a few weeks.